So here we are, we're in Richmond Yard, and there's the local switcher, and it's sitting in the tiny yard lead that exists there. What we're going to do now is show you a sequence that's going to talk about how the switcher gets the cars from that arrival departure track and do some work, and basically the work that it's going to do is going to demonstrate all the possibilities of the things you need to know about switching your trains and how to think about things like 5 principles, one of them being how you determine the length of a train that you can actually operate with, looking at runaround tracks and why you have to use a runaround track. We're also going to look at how we're going to block some cars, and we're going to look at what the issue is in terms of a facing switch as versus a trailing switch. These are all kinds of concepts that if you understand them up front in your thinking will make it much easier to solve a switching problem.
Fire up my locomotive. Here goes.
He's getting in the cab, closes the door. Alcos, they never start the first time. There we go. Usually there's piles of black smoke coming out at this time. So this is CNLokomotiv, and things you want to learn about it is that the RS-18s always ran with the long hood forward. What you have here is the long end and the short end. So with long end forward, on your throttle you'd make sure that your F is your forward. That'll give you a key as to which direction you'll be going in when you start out.
There we go. Then we're ready to head out of the track where she was housed.
Gotta love the CN sound.
Yeah.
So in this yard here, as you can see there, where the locomotive's going, there's 2 empty tracks. Those are classification tracks for this yard sequence. So this is where the switcher is going to bring the cars in, and we'll be able to go from there in terms of doing some action. So now it's heading out into Edmonton Yard to pick up its cars.
All my switches out of Richmond Yard as I head over to Edmonton Yard, the large classification yard there. And I'll want to go on to my train that came in earlier in the day. We give a wave to the tower operator.
So Mike, when you're looking for cars here, what are you going to be doing?
I'm going to be checking my switch list to see which cars are destined for Richmond Yard.
Right. Today's switch list, I had a look at it earlier, and I noticed that we're going to be taking a couple of cars into the paper plant, box cars, and it looks like there's 2 tank cars that are holding sugar that we're taking to the cookie factory. And also, too, there is some empties that we're going to take into the lumber mill. And as a consequence of that, we're also going to be pulling out some cars that are loaded and ready to go on the next train.
That's right.
So now you've hooked on to the big long string. And so you're going to separate out the cars that you want. Again, are you in a situation where you're going to go to the deepest car that you want, I guess is the way it's going to work.
Always the case.
Okay, so
I see my deepest cars
is right down at the
end.
very end, which is convenient, which is nothing wrong with that.
They're the wood chip cars that go into the wood chip industry in the depths of Richmond Yard.
So here we are, and the end of the train is finally being pulled off the arrival departure track. So what are you looking for here, Mike?
Well, Chris, I want to identify the cars that have to go into Richmond Yard, and of course the last 3 cars all go to the wood chip industry.
Yeah.
And so I'll have to place them on one of my tracks, so I have to determine which tracks I place them on.
Now there's probably fewer cars going into that industry, so you probably want to put them on a track where you don't need as much space as, say, for the ones that you don't require.
Exactly. And I've determined the shorter track right now is this middle one here. So
Right.
that's where I'll put my drops that have to go into Richmond Yard for now.
Okay, so you've identified these two wood chip cars.
Yep, and the bulkhead
flat. And you don't need those big propane cars behind.
They're gonna go in on the other track for now.
Okay. So in they go.
Anywhere there is good enough.
Yep.
I'll just make my cut here using the proper end of my tool. Sometimes it's just as easy to pull like this. I'm on a curve. There we go.
Yep.
And those two long tank cars do not need to go with me into Richmond, so I'm going to put them on this other track for the time.
There's probably a few other cars that aren't required there too, eh?
Exactly.
Okay, so you're going to push those into the old station track there, of course.
So we're back in our cut of cars that we don't need onto the station track right now.
So this CN box car and the Ontario Northlands are the first ones that we need, eh?
That's right. So I'll make the cut with the tank car and this side of the CN car.
So what we're doing here is classifying. Really, we're classifying based on the cars that we want versus the ones we don't want.
There we go. I've made the cut. Ready to run by. And we want these two cars. So we're going to put them on the bulkhead flat and with the wood chip cars. They will go into Richmond Yard.
So what's the next cars that we need here?
And we're going to need the black Staley cars there with the sugar.
Okay, two sugar cars. Tank cars.
So we'll just shove this long load of cars we don't need onto the station track.
You want to make sure also, I guess, that you get them far enough in there that they're not fouling any other tracks. Huh?
That's right. There we go, that's good enough. Yeah, so we dropped off those cars that we don't need, and the final two are these black Staley cars, the tank cars. We want to take them into Richmond Yard, and the nice thing about these moves is that everything's blocked already. I'll give myself the switch. We've got our wood chip cars and our bulkhead car blocked. We've got the two box cars blocked, they're going into another industry. And the sugar cars, the Staley cars, will be in another industry.
Okay, Mike, so now you've got that string for Richmond, I see.
That's right, Chris. So we've isolated our cut of cars to go in the yard. I'll throw the switch, give a 2 to the horn, put my bell on, and I'm going in reverse mode right into the yard. Throw this switch to make sure everything's copacetic. And I'm just checking down the line, and we have a couple of storage tracks in the yard there. I'm going to put it on the first track. So I'm going to back my cut of cars, and I'm going to just locate them on one of the two available tracks here in Richmond. Chris has incorporated Richmond Yard onto his layout. It's really a time-saver design, and it's a blast to operate. It's a great job.
Well, it teaches you every aspect of switching.
And that's good there.
We talk about a specific concept that confuses people sometimes. It has to do with facing and trailing. What does that really mean?
Well, that determines the direction the switches are situated. And I'm on my locomotive here, and I've got a consist of cars behind me here. So any switches behind me this way are trailing switches. So for example, if I were to move this whole cut of cars with the engine, this switch over here is a trailing switch. But if you look over here by the runaround track, these switches going in that direction face my locomotive, and they're considered facing switches. But depending on the direction of the train, a trailing switch for one train could actually be a facing switch for another train coming in the opposite direction.
So it's always relative to the locomotive.
It's relative to the locomotive and the train in behind the locomotive.
You're situated on the yard lead here, and the first industry we're going to take care of is the lumber mill.
That's right.
So what's the yard lead mean in here now?
Well, the yard lead is the length of the track you have to conduct your switching, and we see a yard lead here that's about 4 cars long, or 3 cars in a locomotive.
So it's basically the length of one of the sidings you're going to work with. So
that's right.
So you're going to work with basically 3 cars.
That's
mostly.
right, at the most. And
Okay,
we're going up into the lumber area, the lumber mill, and we're going to haul those cars out because those are some of our lifts. And it's important to deal with the lifts first in here because if we put our drops there, we're going to have more traffic to deal with in the end and create headaches. So we're going to go pull the lifts down in the lumber track here. So I'm pulling the wood chip car and the lumber car out from the facility, and I'm going to put it on a spare track over here, put the equipment there. So as I throw the switch that I'm up on the yard lead as well, and it's certainly long enough for the needs I have for my requirements on this day. Chris has done a great job in designing Richmond Yard. If you follow the basic principles of operations and switching, you'll never have a problem in a situation like this.
And in fact, this yard is about 85% full.
Yes. Quite a challenge, but a lot of fun. I look at challenges as opportunities for solutions. And that's what the fun of the hobby brings.
So here we are now. We pulled these 2 sugar cars, and they're going to go into some facing switches, which means there'll be some running around involved, eh?
Yeah, we'll need to use your runaround, and every yard needs to have a runaround track. Throw my switch.
So right now you're laddering up to get into the runaround track.
That's right.
And also the yard lead.
Yep, I'm using the crossovers. I'll use the yard lead. Clear to stop. Switch thrown. Clear to go ahead. Check my switches in front. Take the locomotive and the 2 sugar cars to the yard lead, and then I'm going to deposit them on the 1 track of the runaround, closer to the industry. And the runaround are 2 parallel tracks that converge to one on either end, which allows you to put traffic on them. So I'm going to just settle that traffic there on the runaround track. I'm going to run around it. And I'm going to even show how you can use a shortcut with operations. There we go.
It was really kind of you not to use your bell mic. It gets noisy after a while, doesn't it?
Oh, I know. I'll put it on for you there, Chris. He's always reminding me of things. He's a good lad, is that Christopher? There we go.
So now you're running around those 2 cars to get them at that lead end so you can switch the industry.
And if
you're also going to be applying a principle here that we talked about earlier about taking some cars out first.
That's right. And if you notice, I'm going up into the lumber track, which is now turned into a lead. It's a yard lead for me to go up into the sugar refinery there.
This is something you see in a lot of layouts where people get industries facing 2 different directions, and you have to get to the deepest first before you can finally put the cars back in. those
so
leads.
Going on the cut of traffic there.
There's those Staley cars you're going to pull, eh?
And those are our lifts. So we have to pull them out. We'll bring them on and we'll put them on the other runaround track. And then we'll be in a perfect position to put the spots. Here's our drops that have to go in there. And we've done it in one simple move. We'll have those cars where we want them, the drops and the lifts. There we go. I'll just get my switch.
Just enough space down there, eh?
Yeah, it was just the perfect amount for the sidings. A well-designed yard, I say. And I can spot those cars anywhere here on the runaround track. In the winter time you get a little bit of frost action in our basements, and a level layout does gain a little bit of a grade. Now I'm going to go in on those two Staley cars.
These are your drops.
And I'm going to throw my switch up here too to get in there. And in one fell swoop we've lifted the two lifts, and we're going in on our drops, and we're going to spot them at the industry. And as Chris mentioned, a couple of principles. We lifted from the lumber yard first to give us a good lead into the sugar refinery there. And I'll reach across the layout, throw the switch. And voila! Our drops will be safely placed. And we'll use the runaround to get onto our lifts to put them onto one of the storage tracks. And one more car length. And we're good. And I want to go to the runaround track and run around the two Staley cars that we've already lifted from the plant. And we're going to take them to an outbound track for the next outbound train.
So we've worked a couple principles here. We've done a runaround to put a car in that was facing, and now we're running around now to take those cars and put them into the outbound train that we're preparing on one of the classification tracks here in this yard. So now you're going to come up and grab those two tank cars.
And by planning out your moves mentally in your head before you start doing them, you simplify things a considerable amount. Let me just align my switch there, my couplers. Good job. And we're keeping the yard as clean as possible doing it this way. Everything makes sense. And we line them up for that one track for the outbound train.
So here we are, we've got the box cars now going into the paper plant, but what's this? We look like we have a tank car in the way. You're still going to go through to the deepest car that you want. You're going to connect them all and take this Canadian National, I guess, eh?
That's right, we want the
those are the two that are coming out.
All right. It's all going uncoupled. So the two cars in the front I have to drop over here. The tank car, I have to remember, it remains on this siding, and here are my two lifts. So I've got to remember what I have to do. So what I'll do is I'll bring the tank car and I'll throw it up in another siding. Momentarily drop the three cars. These are my two lifts. This car has to go back in here, but I've got to drop these two cars in at the industry. So once I clear the switch, I'll make my cut. So I made the cut, and now I'm going in.
You're not going to go all the way in, just enough so you can get your tank car.
I've got to put the tank car in there as well, that's right. Good to stop the tank car. I've got to shove it back in the siding in the proper order where it was. When you're switching, you have to remember when you remove cars from sidings that you're not lifting for your train or you're not spotting at the industry. You got to remember that they belonged on that siding.
Okay, so here we are. We've replaced the two new cars are now in the industry that are going to be switched to put paper in eventually by the local. And the tank car has also been put in place. So what's the next step now, Mike?
Well, Chris, we got to go get those two lifts that we've picked up, and we got to put them on the track ready to go out on the next train. So I'll go and do that right now for you. Switch. And we're on.
So I see that there's an interesting problem developing now when you start. Right now we've brought all the outbound cars, and they're in a classification track, which is really in the way for the last placement of the two wood chip cars and the bulkhead flat. So what's the quickest solution to fix that problem?
Well, I would suggest, Chris, we'll pull the whole string off the farther track, grab hold of our three cars, put them on the track where the string's residing now, and put these cars on this other track.
Awesome. Let's do that.
As always, having the bell on in the yard's an important thing. There's always yard workers going to and fro in the yard. Good to stop. Go ahead back.
Maybe get you to blow for some crossings too, Mike.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't see them. I'm way down at this end of the line.
It's a good thing that bus didn't run into the side of the train.
He's a rail fan. He was watching all along.
Okay. Okay, so you got this nice big long string, and then you're going to get down here, and basically these last three cars are the ones that have to go into the industries eventually.
So in essence, we're just swapping the two tracks.
Right.
Worth of cars. Good to go back. So with creative thinking, we're able to make these moves in a limited amount of time. We may get an early break in the lounge. Good to stop.
Give some time. What we'll do is we'll take this whole string and just put them out in the classification yard, because we have to eventually put the switcher back. So if we haul all of this out, now why would we take this out right now? What's the deal?
We've got all of our lifts on the train now. We've left nothing behind in Richmond, so we're good to go with this.
Yeah, so that'll allow any outbound classification to happen sooner rather than later.
That's right. It's called killing two birds with one stone. That's good there. So we're now coming back into Richmond Yard, and we see there's a road crossing up ahead.
So what's left in the sequence of events now?
All we have to get, Chris, are the three cars to go to the lumber mill, two wood chip cars and a bulkhead flat.
I see.
And we're lined up in onto that track. And they're in the proper order as well. We'll use the yard lead in a moment, once we've got onto our train. Set the switch. The design of the yard here in Richmond, while challenging, brings a great deal of operational pleasure.
I guess in many ways it really encompasses everything you really need to know. And actually, if you have one of these on your layout, you can get a lot of practice in.
And it's a great educational tool for newcomers who have never operated before. You can just spend an hour or so with them on an evening in the week before the training session, and they feel really comfortable with what they do once they've learned all the ins and outs of operation. We're running along one of the tracks of the runaround, and now we're heading down into the lumber area. So we'll go park our engine over up in the lead.
So after we park this locomotive, maybe what we can do is just do a quick summary of some of the things we've accomplished today.
Yeah, we've done a lot. It's been a great deal of fun.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, we've used Richmond Yard to teach about the use of a yard lead. I'll just shut that locomotive down.
Yeah. And what are some of the things that we've learned about the yard?
So in the yard, we've got the yard lead.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the engine facility down here. We have a couple of tracks that can be used for classification and storage. We have a number of industries. We have trailing and facing sidings. So sidings going in opposing directions depending which direction your locomotive is coming in. And the runaround allows your locomotive to drop off cars on one leg of the runaround and run around them to the other side, and then you can attack cars from either side or either end of the car, depending which industry you have to put the cars in.
And instead of cherry picking, what's the main principle?
You always want to go for the farthest car.
Yeah,
that and it's good to perform your lifts first if you can, to clear up space for your drops, and to give you clear alleys when going in and out of the yard. To get across the whole yard is quite extensive, the track work, and you want to make sure you have a clear lane to get to all areas or all aspects of the yard.
Well, thanks for helping us out here, Mike. You and I had a great time here, I think. And the purpose of this really is to sort of just help folks that may want to know a little bit more about operations. There's no one way of doing things, that's for sure.
Yeah, 6 ways to skin a cat, they say. But for a first-time operator coming to your layout, Chris, if they just review some of the things we mentioned today, and with the help of an experienced operator, they'll find the joy that we find every Friday night when we come in and run trains here.
That's for sure. Now we got to go and find those water towers.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I'm for that.